Have you ever wondered why the Israel-Palestine conflict has persisted for so long and why it seems so complex to resolve? This question has plagued minds across the globe for decades. The roots of this seemingly intractable conflict can be traced back to the late 19th century with the rise of two powerful ideologies, Zionism and Arab nationalism. Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish homeland, began gaining momentum, while concurrently Arab nationalism, which sought independence from colonial powers and unity among Arab nations, was also on the rise. As we move forward into the 20th century, the establishment of Israel in 1948 becomes a pivotal point in our narrative. The creation of a Jewish state in the heart of the Middle East led to a series of wars, uprisings, or intifadas, and a constant state of tension that has persisted to this day. Central to the conflict are a few key points of contention. First up, we have the territorial disputes. The borders of Israel have been a subject of contention since its inception, with land being won and lost over the course of several wars. This struggle over land is further complicated by the establishment of Israeli settlements in territories claimed by Palestinians. Next, we have the refugee issue. The wars led to mass displacement of people on both sides, creating a refugee crisis that is yet to be fully resolved. The question of whether these refugees have the right to return to their homes remains a major stumbling block in peace negotiations. Lastly, the status of Jerusalem. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. This city, considered holy by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, is perhaps the most emotive and complex issue in this conflict. Understanding this historical context is key to deciphering the present. The memories of lost homes, the fight for self-determination, and the struggle for a homeland have left deep scars on both sides. And it is this history, with all its pain and conflict, that sets the stage for the current crisis unfolding in Gaza. The recent flare-up of violence didn't just happen overnight. It was the culmination of a series of incidents, each adding fuel to a fire that's been smoldering for decades. Let's rewind a bit to the month of Ramadan, a time of peace and reflection for millions of Muslims worldwide. In Jerusalem, however, tensions were mounting. Palestinian families in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah found themselves facing eviction, their homes claimed by Israeli settlers. This was not a new occurrence, but the timing, during the holy month of Ramadan, heightened the tension. As word of these evictions spread, protests erupted, leading to clashes in the streets. At the center of this turmoil was the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest sites in Islam. What started as peaceful protests quickly turned into violent confrontations, with security forces using rubber bullets and stun grenades against the protesters. The images of this violence, particularly within the sacred walls of Al-Aqsa, reverberated across the globe, igniting outrage and condemnation. Then the situation took a dramatic turn. Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, entered the scene. Citing the evictions and the violence at Al-Aqsa as provocations, they began launching rockets into Israel. Israel responded with airstrikes. It was a deadly exchange, with civilians on both sides caught in the crossfire. As we take stock of these events, it's crucial to remember that behind every headline and news report, there are real people living through this unrest. Families in Sheikh Jarrah facing eviction, worshippers at Al-Aqsa caught up in clashes, residents of Gaza and Israel living in fear of the next rocket or airstrike. As the conflict escalated, the international community watched in horror and concern. Each new development, each act of violence is not just another chapter in a long-standing conflict. It's a sobering reminder of the real human cost of war, and a prompt to the world that a lasting solution is urgently needed. With each passing day of conflict, the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens. It's a reality that becomes all too clear as we delve into the impact of the ongoing strife on the people living at ground zero of this struggle. The conflict has not only razed buildings to the ground, but also claimed countless innocent lives. The numbers are staggering. Children, women, the elderly, no demographic is immune to the indiscriminate barrage of violence. The loss of life is tragic, and the physical wounds, though healable, leave behind emotional scars that may never fully mend. Amidst the chaos, the pillars of society crumble. Hospitals, once a sanctuary for the sick and wounded, now lay in ruins. Schools that were once buzzing with the chatter of eager young minds now echo with a deafening silence. The destruction of these infrastructures deprives the people of Gaza of basic human rights and the right to a dignified life. Thousands of families have been displaced from their homes with no certainty of when they will be able to return. Their lives, already marked by hardship, now teeter on the edge of survival. It's a dire situation that calls for immediate action and assistance. International organizations are stepping forward to provide aid. The Red Cross, for instance, is tirelessly working to deliver much-needed supplies and medical assistance to the affected areas. Their efforts are a beacon of hope in these dark times, but the scale of the crisis is overwhelming and the need for help is immense. The toll of the conflict on the people of Gaza is devastating. Each day that passes under the shadow of war deepens the humanitarian crisis, and the path towards recovery seems increasingly steep. Yet in the face of adversity, the spirit of resilience endures. Let's not forget the people of Gaza and the countless others around the world who are caught in the crossfire of conflict. Their plight is a call to action for all of us, to strive for a world where peace prevails over war and love over hate. The international response to the crisis has been varied and complex. Let's start with the International Criminal Court's decision. It ruled that it had jurisdiction over war crimes committed in the Palestinian territories. The decision was based on Palestine being a member of the ICC's founding treaty and having referred the situation to the court. The ICC prosecutor now faces the task of deciding whether to open a criminal investigation into war crimes allegedly committed by both Israeli Defense Forces and armed Palestinian groups. This decision has met with varied responses, from outright rejection by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to a welcome by the Palestinian Authority. Then we have Israel's move to designate 6 Palestinian civil society groups as terrorist organizations. This sparked significant international backlash, with the United Nations and numerous human rights watchdogs criticizing the decision. Even the United States, a close ally of Israel, expressed concern over the move. Meanwhile, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the guardian of the Geneva Conventions, called for de-escalation and adherence to the rules of war. They emphasized the prohibition of attacks on civilians and the requirement for proportionality and precautions to avoid civilian casualties. They also called for safe movement for ambulances and staff of the Palestine Red Crescent Society and the Megan David Adams Society. The United Nations has persistently called for a ceasefire, urging both sides to step back from the brink and prevent further loss of life. However, these calls have so far been met with a deafening silence. In the Middle East, reactions have been mixed, with some countries condemning Israel's actions and others remaining notably silent. The United States, on the other hand, has been caught in a delicate balancing act, expressing concern over the violence but also reiterating its support for Israel's right to self-defense. Despite these diplomatic efforts, a resolution to the crisis remains elusive. So where do we go from here? As we look forward, the path ahead is undeniably fraught with challenges and uncertainties. The Israel-Palestine conflict, steeped in decades of historical, political, and religious intricacies, presents a complex array of potential scenarios. One possibility is the resumption of peace talks. Diplomatic efforts may once again rise to the forefront, with the international community playing a key role in facilitating dialogue. Yet the prospect of peace talks hinges on numerous factors, including the political climate within Israel and Palestine, the stance of global powers, and the willingness of both sides to engage in meaningful negotiations. The journey towards peace is a marathon, not a sprint, requiring sustained commitment, patience, and a mutual understanding of shared humanity. Conversely, there's also the possibility of further escalation. The recent unrest has shown how rapidly tensions can flare up, leading to a cycle of violence that inflicts immeasurable suffering on the people on both sides. This scenario is a stark reminder of the urgency for peace and the dire consequences of its absence. Lastly, we must consider the long-term implications of this conflict. The situation in Gaza and the broader Israel-Palestine region will undoubtedly have lasting effects on their societies, economies, and relations with the world. The shadow of this conflict extends far beyond its immediate geographical boundaries, influencing global politics, international relations, and humanitarian efforts. The future remains uncertain, but what's clear is that the path to peace is a difficult and complex one. It's a path that demands courage, resolve, and above all, a deep-seated desire for justice and coexistence. As we navigate through these uncertain times, the hope for a peaceful resolution remains a beacon guiding our collective journey towards a future where dignity, freedom, and security are realities for all.